What's up, everyone? I am Trevor. This is Zach. We are Quill and Hammer. Welcome back to another episode. Zach, what are we doing today?
Well, today we're going to take a little bit of a break from film and we're going to reforge something from the video game genre. We're going to be doing Hogwarts Legacy today because we love Harry Potter. We've already gone through the Harry Potter films, and Hogwarts Legacy, admittedly, was a pretty good game. I really enjoyed it, but there are things that I think could be improved. And I think we're on the same page here. So I'm going to kick it back to you. What did you think of the game and what things do you think need to be changed?
All right, so the game was really fun. Really fun. Loved it. Loved the open world. Loved getting to explore. Um, Loved learning and finding different spells and being able to switch them in and out, the combat, and it was fun. We had fun playing the game. Um, I haven't played it in a while, so I got upset because there was a glitch and I couldn't get, platinum on the PlayStation. I need like
Mhm.
one or two more trophies and I couldn't get them, so I was mad. And uh and then I stopped. And so I don't even know if that is fixed or not, and I don't know why that's relevant to this conversation. It isn't, but um I
The
haven't played
point
it in
being
a
you
while.
haven't played in a while.
Yeah. But it was really fun. I thought they did a fantastic job, but there are also things that looking back, wish we had fixed or wish had been done differently. Um, Mainly, it focuses around the plot. And before I
Okay.
jump into that, though, Zach, like, what about you? What did you like? What didn't work? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, see, I think I'm a bit on the opposite side of you. I thought the plot was generally pretty good. I mean, for a Harry Potter world video game set, roughly 100 years before the events of the Harry Potter franchise, the Harry Potter books, I thought it was a pretty good plot. I always thought that the Goblin Wars was an interesting bit of wizarding history that they should go into. Every time I read the books and I hear them talking about writing essays on the Goblin Wars, I keep thinking like, hey, that seems like um, a pretty good plot point to center your story around. And so, honestly, I thought the story was just fine. I actually enjoyed um, the fact that, your main character was unique. Um, I liked that he or she came to Hogwarts as a fifth year and you were playing catch up a little bit. And I did enjoy the I don't want to say mystical aspect, but the unique aspect of your character that they had a connection to this ancient form of magic. They could see this ancient magic. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was a good way to tie in gameplay elements that were necessary into the story. But on the other hand, I think there are things in the gameplay that fell a little flat for me. Namely the combat. It got a little repetitive. Some of the side quests got a little repetitive. And I'll get into that later, but that was kind of my view. So I think I'm a bit on the opposite side of the spectrum to you, Trev.
Okay, well, do you want to do plot first, or do you want to do gameplay first?
Why don't we do plot first?
Okay, I really have an issue with the ancient magic thing.
Okay.
I think Harry Potter is such a deep, or could be such a deep well of anything that you don't need a special form or ancient magic to move the plot forward. I think it was used as a crutch to make the main character special, when to me, I think a normal person working hard, doing like I don't know how to say it in the right way that makes it make sense, but like maybe a Hermione-ish type person who works hard, studies hard, puts in all of the work, finds something, maybe creates some spells themselves, does the intellectual work, could move the plot forward without there having to be something that needs to be attained. Like, why can't we make Ranrock? Why can't we
Raniac.
make Ranrock just an incredibly powerful um, protagonist? He is. He's evil. He has a huge following. Goblin magic is crazy. He looks like he's on steroids. Like, why can't we just have that be the plot versus the wizards? You know what I mean? Why does it
I
have to
get
be they're chasing something ancient when the wizarding world and magic is enough in and of itself, I guess.
okay. Well, I see where you're coming from, but my question for you then is, how do you bring the main character into that then? Because we are just a student, we're a fifth year, and Raniac. Sorry, that's Ranger's Apprentice,
Hmm.
not not Harry Potter. Ranrock, he is waging war against the wizarding world, not against Hogwarts,
Hmm.
right? So a student, a fifth year student at that, who's what, you'd be 15 years old. I don't see how he would get involved in the plot all that much. And maybe your argument would be, well, Harry Potter was a first year and up through seventh year, and he got involved in the plot with Voldemort, but there was an inherent connection between the two, right? Whereas we're essentially a random student. If you take away the ancient magic bit, we're essentially a random student who's going to Hogwarts as a fifth year for no reason at all. Not no reason, but there's nothing to tie us back to the plot, and the ancient magic was what put you in front of the conflict with Ranrock. At least that's how I view it. What do you think about that?
Well, the I mean, yes, that was the plot device used to get you into the fight. But go back to Harry Potter. There could be another connection. Revenge. Same thing. I think that is a much more compelling um, reason to be against someone. If your entire family was taken out, that explains why you're, a fifth year and just coming into the into Hogwarts. You have some magic, but maybe you were homeschooled. It was the 1800s. You don't necessarily have to have been at Hogwarts or whatever. Um, maybe I don't know, but revenge can be an absolute thing. If Ranrock killed his parents, then that's reason enough for him to want to go. That's reason enough for him to go to Hogwarts and try and learn more magic, because his family was teaching him different kinds of magic or different other things or whatever. You can have that be the plot device. And it's like, okay, well, his parents were teaching him how to make spells, or, they created random things or whatever. Maybe that's why Ranrock wanted them, is because they were good at creating spells and experimental things, and that could have been the plot device without doing something ancient that's just here, you're special. It's like, no, you do work. Your family has been doing this work. That's why we wanted your family, because they developed these spells. They're like the Ollivander of spells, right? If you do that, then that's your reason Ranrock was after the family. They refused. He kills them. And then you've got this 15-year-old who has some magic and some skills, but not the standard, book of spells grade 1 through 5 kind of information. And so he has to go learn the real skills, and then he's trying to take the fight to Ranrock.
Okay. I I mean, I think that would be an interesting plot. I'm not going to say it wouldn't be interesting. I I guess I don't quite get your problem with the ancient magic. Can you explain to me why you're against the ancient magic idea? Is it just because it feels convenient to you? Or what is your hatred of this plot device stemming from?
So I don't know what it is stemming from. I just think like the idea that you could be a normal person that works hard, that does the work, I guess, and can still be influential and can still be um, extraordinary without having to have something inherently special about you. You don't have to be the chosen one. You don't have to be the one connected to the ancient magic to do something great. Um, you come in, you have a personal reason that gets you involved in the fight, but then you work hard, you do something amazing because you are driven, not because you had this random connection that then makes you, I guess, important because you have this random connection. It's like maybe I look at myself and I think, okay, yeah, I can see this magic. Why should I go and get myself killed as a 15-year-old? Because I can sense this magic. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. I think I disagree. Not that I disagree, but I still think I prefer the ancient magic plot arc. And maybe it's because it's more of a cliche. It's like it's the hero's path um cliche, you know what I mean? Or the writing device, literary device, the hero's
Right.
path. You know, nobody chosen special for some reason, and they go off and defeat evil because that's what heroes do, type thing.
Right.
And I can appreciate your stance that, you know, there is merit to having a plot where you are just a normal guy and you work hard and, you know, do the right thing or the right thing for the wrong reason, perhaps that way. You know what I mean? So I acknowledge that that would be an interesting plot point, but I think for the lore of Harry Potter, I think I prefer this ancient magic standpoint. Um, but just to do a little bit of a thought experiment, I think part of it is the ancient magic plays heavily into the gameplay, right? And that's one of the challenges of making a video game is you have to have plot to make it interesting, but then the plot has to harmonize with the gameplay, right? And so if I remember correctly, in a lot of instances, the ancient magic served as, like a guidance system, or, there were, I mean, it's like the things in the world that you could interact with. You were able to interact with things that other people didn't see because you had this ancient magic and you have the touch. Yeah, it's a convenience factor, but it funnels into the gameplay. So let me give a proposition for if we did do the plot sort of how you're describing. Revenge, um you're coming to Hogwarts as a fifth year, and you want to take the fight um to the goblins, right? Hear me out here. So I think you could keep a lot of things largely the same, but there are video games where you focus on recruitment of people,
Hmm.
And as the story progresses, they help you in battle, but if they die, they actually remain dead. So if we were to do that, I think a way to make it have a little bit more weight to the story and a little bit more consequence, I think that might be an interesting gameplay device to add in there. You're this 15-year-old who's upset and um, wants to take the fight to the goblins. You're only one kid, so you try and recruit your friends, and maybe one of them gets killed. Maybe you have, in the story, one of them has to get killed. There's a prearranged one that gets killed that you recruit, but
Hmm.
then others that you recruit can die throughout the game, and there's no going back, right?
Right.
And so you feel like, well, was this really the right thing to do because I'm getting my friends killed type thing. And then it adds a little bit more of strategy to it. What kind of student are you going to recruit? Are you going to recruit someone who's good with potions, who can maybe lend a support role? Are you going to recruit uh herbologist who can use interesting plants to help, you know,
Right.
combat, or things like this, right? And I'm sort of getting into gameplay stuff that maybe I wish would have happened. But what do you think about that? Do you think, with your idea of how the revenge plot would go, do you think that would be a complementary gameplay style, or do you think I'm off my rocker?
No, it is. It is a complementary gameplay style, and I like the idea. In order to make, in order to make the character real, you need consequences.
Right.
Um, and I'm trying to think how to describe what I'm thinking, but like clearly your character needs a plot arc. You need to go
Right.
from point A to Z, and how do we get there? And part of the fun of an open world game is they program these decisions that you can make. And
Hmm.
yeah, by nature of programming and everything, they are going to be limited, but like if say there's a group of like 8 characters you could recruit at any given time, but you can only have 4 of them or whatever, I don't know. So you have to kind of choose, and then things happen, but like I agree, you need to have consequences. You need to have, if they die, they are dead. But you need to be able to have things that change you from, I just want to kill this goblin because he killed my family, to whatever you want. Like, okay, yeah, he needs to die, but I guess revenge isn't the right thing, or maybe killing is wrong, or I'm trying to think about what's his name when you learn the killing curse, and the kid, the Slytherin kid, and like you know what I mean? Like I can't remember
Right.
his name. It's been so long, but that idea of like consequences happen and you can lie for him or not, or
Right. Right.
but to a more extreme case, like you choose people and you learn skills, and you bring people in that can help you with whatever it is that you need. Um, I like that idea. I like the idea that maybe you work with like the herbologist, like a Neville-like character, and
Hmm.
if yours, and I keep going back to this, the reason that you're a fifth year, you were homeschooled, I guess, by your parents, and then they
Hmm.
were killed, but your parents, they're kind of this experimental, create spells kind of, and so that's your main skill, and then you have to decide to work with a herbologist, and that helps you create a skill or something that you can do that then you can interact with the world. And then you go and you work with the Slytherin kid and you find ways to improve dueling that can maybe mimic ancient magic stuff that you're doing, but you actually earned that and built that skill or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
To interact with the world, you have these relationships that you're building, um, and maybe two or three different combinations could give you the same access to certain things. Like there's more than one way to, you know, uh, break down a wall or whatever. You can, or open a door. You can break the door down. You can learn how to pick locks. You can knock on the door and it will just maybe it'll open because someone's behind it. You can ask. I don't know. There are different ways to get
Right,
through a door.
right,
Um, and so you can use those different characters to create the skills you need to then go and take on the goblins.
right,
But then of course, if you are choosing one of the plots where you're interacting with the dark wizards and you aren't careful and I don't know how they would program it or whatever, but like then your Neville herbologist character gets killed because you weren't protecting him or you didn't do whatever you should have, then you can't use herbology to open the door. You have to then go
right,
find someone else and do something else.
right,
And you have one person, like you said, that dies, and maybe that could be the professor, maybe that can be someone else. Um, but in the course of the plot, you get someone killed, and that's what starts this maybe revenge alone isn't good enough, but like still you have the skills to defeat Ranrock, so you have to keep going. But like
right.
your motivations expand and deepen and change, and you become a different person based on the choices you make all the way throughout the end of the plot. But then it comes back to my main point. You have a skill that you learned from your family that then you work on and develop, but like anyone could have learned that skill. In my mind, it's like I'm thinking of Ghosts of Tsushima with
Hmm.
Jin, and he's a gifted samurai,
Right,
but then he learns these other skills to do what is necessary. But the only thing that makes him, I don't want to say extraordinary, but like the only thing that differentiates him from all the other samurai is that he is willing to learn these skills and do whatever is necessary to get rid of the Mongols, right?
right. It's not like there was something inherently special or different about him other than his will to do what was necessary.
Yes. And
I
that's
can,
what I want out of a plot. Something
okay,
that pushes your character to do things, to be out of the box, even though he starts out of the box, to, take his own perspective, learn the things that he does, create spells, do something that no one else could do, but not because he's special, but because of his motivations rather than here's something that you don't have any control over. You just are connected to this ancient power.
right.
Go ahead.
Well, when you put it that way, I agree that maybe that would be a more compelling plot. I really do.
Yeah,
Um, because Ghost of Tsushima was just a masterpiece.
it
I
was.
absolutely loved it. And one of my favorite things about it was that aspect of the plot. It's like, do you stick by your values
Hmm.
or do you do whatever's necessary to save the people that you're supposed to be saving?
Right.
So I can very much appreciate that perspective. Now, one more thing about this hypothetical gameplay aspect.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of bringing in these ideas from games that I haven't played, which maybe isn't a little bit kosher, but the protagonists or the companions dying and having permadeath. That's a thing I believe in the Fire Emblem franchise.
Okay.
You can recruit people. If they die type thing, right? But the gameplay is typically turn-based, right?
Yeah.
Do you do you think changing to a turn-based format would be necessary for that? Or do you think there would be a way to keep it action, an action RPG with that element in there? And the reason I bring it up is it's because, well, how do you, actively fight all these people, but still make sure, character X is getting healed so that he doesn't die type thing?
Right. Well, in my mind, with these open world games, you have so many different things that you can do, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, you can stealth and think of all the spells that you know in Hogwarts Legacy. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you've got what, 16 or 20 spells that you can equip, and you can only have 8 at a time. So you have that going on. So you have to choose the right spells before you get into combat. But like I think if you just simply have like think of what's that game that you like, Kingdom Hearts, where
Right.
you in the bottom corner you've got Donald and Mickey's health bar or whoever your
Mm-hmm.
character is. I think that's all you need. You have to keep an eye on that, knowing this character could, die at any time. You have to keep your eye on that. You're still fighting all of these people. You could die at any different time or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can monitor their health bar, but then you have to have a thing that's like, okay, um, I for lack of a better word, it's like Neville is a herbologist. He can fight in certain circumstances better than others. So if you put him against the Goblin Berserkers, he's not going to do very well. But if you put him against the Acromantulas, he can set traps or do other things. And
Sure.
each person has a weakness you know, or strength that you can include in there. Um, and then it becomes more strategy based of which character do I have to take with me or do I get to take with me? And then some plot points you have to have a certain character, either character A or B.
Sure.
Um, but I don't know if necessarily turn-based is the way I would go.
Mm-hmm.
But admittedly, I can't remember the last time I played a turn-based game, and I'm having trouble picturing how it would work in my mind.
Okay. Um, well, I think since you're not as well versed with turn-based games, let's just stick with the action element and maybe I'll give a bit of a solution. So, my idea was, you have you have your companion, right? And I thought, well, and let's take Kingdom Hearts for example. You're fighting and Donald or Goofy or whoever your companions are, they can get hit and immediately lose all their health, right? Because
Right.
it's kind of chaotic, right? And I thought, well, that would be pretty unsatisfying if, you're trying to take care of the main boss and they get hit by a stray spell and then whoops, they're dead.
Hmm.
So here's my just off the cuff on the fly solution to that. What if you had, that same kind of thing? They have a health bar, and in Kingdom Hearts, when they get their health depleted, they faint, right? So they are out of commission. They're not dead, obviously, because plot, but they're out of commission, right? You can revive them or whatever. So here's my idea. You have that same thing. Your companion faints, and you have like a time limit to go and revive them, or they can take two more hits once they've fainted before they're dead, before they get killed. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So you can try and what's the word? You can drive as close to the edge as you want. If it's like, okay, well, they they just went down, but I know they have three hits until they die. I've only got this one enemy left, so I'll make the decision to keep fighting the enemy instead of going to revive him.
Right.
And maybe when you do that, another enemy happens to come up and kills your character. So it's like you made a choice in real time, and then because you took the risk, maybe you got punished, or maybe you don't,
Right.
But um, I don't know. Just that's just an off the cuff thing. But what do you think?
I like the idea. I'm in my mind, I'm imagining when you and I played Uncharted 3 online and
Hmm.
Uncharted 4, where if you go down, you have the timer
Right.
slowly, and based on whichever character it is, or how far they've progressed, or what choices you have made, maybe that character has the quicker timeline or a lesser timeline, or whatever.
Hmm.
But I like that idea of you can make choices, but you can heal them, you can do whatever you need, and it kind of is adaptive.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think that's helpful. And again, I don't know how they do the logic of fighting with a side character. Like,
Right.
how do they determine in Kingdom Hearts uh the probability of Donald getting hit with a fatal hit based on all of the things that you have equipped him with, you
I
know?
mean, honestly, game logic and programming is such an enigma to me. I wish I
Yeah.
understood it more because then I feel like I
Could
could
comment on
propose
this.
I could
Hmm.
comment on it. I could propose things that would actually be feasible. This is all just theoretical, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Um, and the other thing that I was thinking is if you went that sort of route with permadeath for your companions, it would require such a detailed plot, not necessarily a plot, but such a detailed written script. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? So that it's like you have so many branching paths and you have to write, okay, well, what would character A do in this path? Path 1A 32. You know what I mean? And it's like
Right.
it becomes difficult. And so I acknowledge that maybe this wouldn't be the most feasible game to produce, but in a perfect world, I think this would be the way that you go if we make the plot changes that you suggest.
Yeah. So it's like that. And maybe, it's as simple as, the more elements you add, and by elements I mean characters that you can recruit, the more complex it gets.
Right.
But like, so maybe you limit it to 4 or 5 or 3 or 4 or whatever, but
Right.
like that's fine. Um, I acknowledge that that would be difficult, but the my then counter argument to that is, okay, well, you have so huge of a world, and not that I begrudge having such a huge open world because I thought it was really fun,
Hmm.
but rather than having it that big or having all of the different, places to explore or little side quests or whatever, you cut that in half, focus on the plot, and then have a less coding to do on these little side quests, and you make a really solid, amazing plot like we described, where you have different
Right.
branches and different things, and you can detail out the script, and you spend a lot of time on that, and then you can do whatever else. And
Right.
then, I mean, think of DLC content and all of the stuff that you can do. Um, with that, you could expand it as needed and do whatever you want. But
Right. right.
Anyway, what are your thoughts on that? Because now we're getting into the world and gameplay elements
So
outside of plot.
so I guess I'll start airing my grievances. Um, and I think just to comment on your idea, yeah, I do think that would be better, and maybe just my last say for um our previous conversation, I think I would prefer, maybe you can have three companions at a time and there are eight to choose from. So if one dies, you can go and recruit another, but you can never have all of them at once. It's
Right.
like you have to make decisions. And I do think cutting down on the open world aspect to accommodate for this deeper recruitment system and deeper plot that could potentially happen, I think that gives more replayability to a game
Hmm.
than a massive open world does.
Right.
So, with that comment, let me lead into one of my grievances is not the open world because it was magical. You know what I mean? Like I absolutely loved the game for bringing me into the Harry Potter universe. It did that exquisitely well.
Yes.
I loved exploring, the surrounding hamlets. I loved exploring Hogsmeade. The castle was absolutely perfect.
Yep.
And, finding the secrets inside the castle, that was so much fun. I mean, it felt like you were in Hogwarts,
Yes.
and everything that you imagine about Hogwarts, it fleshed out. And for that reason, I loved it. The things that I didn't love were travel around the open world because I have a love-hate relationship with fast travel, number one, because if you fast travel, you're missing the game,
Right.
right? But your modes of transport, I felt like became cheap. You have your broom, and then you have several flying animals to use. And it's like, well, there's really no difference between them. So you either use your broom because it's convenient, or you use a hippogriff because you're stubborn and you want to use your hippogriff, but they control exactly the same. There's no pros or cons to using one or the other.
Right.
And it felt like there wasn't any point to it. And maybe that aspect is a little bit of a nitpick. I'll throw that out there. But I tend to see this kind of pattern where it's like there's too many choices that really aren't that different.
Right.
And my next example of that is in combat. We talk about how we have 20 different spells, but if you remember, they're kind of color coded, right? You've got your purple ones, you've got your yellow ones, your red ones, etc.
Yep.
And then your enemies have corresponding shield colors. They throw up charms and it's either red, yellow, or purple.
Right.
And you just have to use any spell of that color to break their
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 shield. Yeah.
charm. And then right trigger, just kill them to death. You know what I mean? So it was like it it felt a little underwhelming at the end of the day.
Hmm.
The spells didn't feel different enough. There wasn't incentive to create different loadouts of spells
Right.
because they basically did the same thing. You had one that lifted them up in the air, you had one that slammed them down and then they were up in the air. It's like there's no difference. There's
Hmm.
no one does more damage or one keeps them aloft longer, or so for that reason I had a problem with the combat.
Right.
And to fix that, I don't know if you do fewer spells, or if you have to have some sort of synergy between spells. I don't know. I haven't given it enough thought, but just as a general gripe, the combat felt very repetitive and not very inspiring after about halfway through the game. It was
Right.
just the same. And even when you're playing on a higher difficulty, it's like you've got your parry, and then you you do everything else, and then you have your overpowered ancient magic that you can use on the surroundings. You know what I mean? It was like there were cool things, but it wasn't, it was too repetitive. And I think maybe a problem of that is just the nature of Harry Potter's combat.
Hmm.
It's like how do you bring a wizarding duel to life in a video game where you have to program everything,
Right.
you know? So again, I recognize that there are definite limitations that make these kinds of things difficult to realize, but nonetheless, it did feel underwhelming at the end of the day, you
Right.
know, and especially once you get, um, some of the more powerful spells, it's like, well, you just set one of them on fire, you Avada Kedavra the other, you Crucio another, and then throw a barrel at him. It's like it became too easy and it became too repetitive. And that
Right.
was one of my big gripes. Now, I have some more things that I can complain about, but do you have any comments before I just steamroll on?
I I agree with you on the combat. I thought it was still fun, and I'm not as you know, I am a button masher,
Definitely you are.
and so I am not as skilled at combos or, putting, different moves together. I just come on,
Right,
so it didn't bother me as much, but I get what you were saying because you
right,
have the four different colors or whatever. You have to, use those. It doesn't really matter what it is. So yes, I understand what you were saying right there. Um, but I don't know how you get past that because in my mind, a wizarding duel is like the epitome of a wizarding duel is like Voldemort versus Dumbledore in
Order the Phoenix.
Order of the Phoenix, right? Where um they're using the environment, they're doing different things, they're trying to catch the other person off guard. It's not just, I mean, when it comes down to it, Avada Kedavra is just a straight line spell shot at you, and if you can get out of the way or get something in the way, like you can do that.
Right,
Dumbledore is a good enough wizard that he can just step out of the way, you know.
right,
Um, and that's why the duel is so epic, is because they're taking different things, they're thinking on their feet, they're trying to outsmart someone else. It's not just, you know, basic, linear thinking, I guess.
right.
But
Well,
how do you bring that to a game you have to program?
and we talked about that in our Harry Potter episodes, how kind of like that elementalism, you have to think on your feet, but I don't know how you program that into a video game. I really don't.
Right.
There was a game that came out within the last year, I think. It's called Eternal Strands. I've had my eye on it, but haven't had time to pick it up. And they tried to do something like that, where you had a fire elementalism, ice, and I don't know, maybe a telekinesis or something. And the world was supposed to be completely interactive. And the way that you dealt with your enemies was by, interacting with the world in this way. Maybe you freeze a dragon's wings and it comes crashing down, or, something. That was sort of the idea.
Yeah.
I didn't get a chance to obviously play it, get into it, and see how it, actually panned out. But I don't know. It's a problem, and I think if I'm not just griping, they did a pretty okay job. You
Right.
know, it was fun. I enjoyed it. And there are ways that you can, tailor your experience to make it more difficult. You can put your own kinds of restrictions on your spell work, or you can try and do things completely stealthily,
Hmm.
whatever, right? But um, so at the end of the day, it was fine. I'm not going to not play the sequel because it uses the same combat. You know what I mean? It wasn't that bad, but
Right.
just at the end of the day, it did start to feel a little repetitive.
Yep.
Um, and back onto the repetitive, I began to loathe the Merlin challenges for two
Hmm.
reasons. Number one, they there were like five variations of puzzles, and that was it.
Yep.
And there were like how many? 100 puzzles to solve. I don't know. Maybe that's the wrong number. Maybe it's more like 50. I don't know. But it was kind of oppressive how many there were. And so if you're a completionist like us,
Right.
it's like it takes forever and it gets so repetitive and boring. So number one, it was boring. And number two, it didn't really add much.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I can't remember if you got skill points or whatever from doing them, and maybe that was their idea was, okay, well, here's an easier way to get skill points rather than just going around and doing side quests or progressing with the main story. Maybe that was sort of their thought, but when they were advertising the game, one of the things they said was, you may find um ruins or something left behind by an ancient wizard named Merlin, or that are rumored to be left behind by Merlin, and you'll have to discover his secrets. But then there was no weight to it. It was like, okay, yeah, sure, this was from Merlin, cool, and that
Yeah.
was it. And I think the the reward for getting all of them is that you get a Merlin beard and a hat or
Right.
something, and that was very underwhelming as well. You know what I mean? Like I expected it to be this massive side quest, where it's like you discover some hidden secret about, Hogwarts or the wizarding world, and it's this big weighty, revelation, but it wasn't. So that was pretty underwhelming to me too.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I didn't love the the skill tree. I thought the skill tree could have been better, and I think I would prefer a sequel to this game to be more on the side of, you choose a character class rather than you can do everything.
Right.
I've heard somebody say recently that, a game for everyone is a game for no one. In
Right.
fact, I think it was the creator of um, Split Fiction and It Takes Two. I can't remember his name right now, but um, I recall him saying, a game for everybody is a game for nobody. And so you have to make certain decisions that make it a distinct style of a game, right? And I think for the most part, I mean, it was really good. I really don't have that deep of a problem with Hogwarts Legacy. I really hope there's a sequel and I hope it comes out soon.
Right.
But but I would prefer a class system. So maybe you pick being a duelist, or you pick being a charms specialist, or maybe you're a potions specialist or
Yeah.
a herbologist, but I want to have to choose that route and have a skill set based on that route rather than being able to be, a master of everything. And maybe that
Right.
kind of goes back to your plot point of, you know, just you're so special, you can do whatever because you're special. Like in reality, there wouldn't be a wizard especially a fifth year, who could have that wide of a skill set.
Right.
So that would be, if I could choose one thing to change, it would be having a class system so that you have to choose which way you want to play the game. And I mean, I guess you can argue, well, you still can. You can choose what you want to do, but you don't have to. And there's,
Right.
there's more consequence if you choose to do something one way. Anyway, I've been ranting for a while, and I'll come to a close here.
No, so I like that idea going back to, you know, everyone has their skill. Everyone has a different style. Um and in my mind that increases playability. If you,
Exactly.
like when was the last time, I remember you and I were gonna play together,
Hmm.
and go through and do the same things, um, while we were,
Screen sharing
screen
and
sharing and stuff. So we
chatting.
could we could just hang out and do it, and we did it once. We
Yep.
played exactly once and then
Yep.
never went back. And the only reason you would ever replay it is to explore the Slytherin common room instead of the Hufflepuff or the Gryffindor or whatever.
Right.
And but you still have access to the same skill tree. You still have access to the same whatever. But if you have to be, you know, the care of magical creatures guy, then that's how you solve your problems. And so then you need to recruit someone different who can fill a different skill set, who can help you do these separate things. And then
Exactly.
you go back and you're like, well, that was fun, but I want to play as the herbology guy or the dark arts guy.
Hmm.
Um, and that gives you different things that you can do. I like that idea. But going back to the open world stuff, I wanted to comment on that.
Hmm.
It gets so repetitive, and I think they spent too much time on customization, and you can choose, and I don't even remember what the if the different like robes or things, like they had some sort of advantages or disadvantages, didn't they, that you could
They
choose?
did. They did.
But like I felt like you spent way too much time on that when it kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Where the real, complexity could come from what path you choose to learn, um, which classes you have an affinity for, et cetera, et cetera. And then
Right.
you build from there. But they spent too much time on find different, clothing options, and you need this, and this can help you with this or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it was too much. It was too much of that. And then it gets to the same thing. There are too many little towns and too many little caves and ruins, and you spend, 75% of the game looking for chests and trying to open
Right.
open the houses and do, different things that it gets tedious, very tedious after a while.
And I
And
think, sorry if I can cut in.
yeah,
I think I would prefer, just to your point, I would prefer having larger dungeons that you can find and having a big reward at the end to tons of little chests throughout the world. You know what I mean? I would much prefer that. Optional dungeons
hmm
that are difficult and you have puzzles to solve. I would prefer to have 5 to 6 of those throughout an open world rather than 20 side quests that get you a mediocre item plus 100 chests to find,
right.
you know. So anyway, sorry to cut you off, but I just
No,
decided to.
that's my point is you can have a massive dungeon that I mean, they could do whatever. They could decide we want each of these dungeons to take like 2 hours of gameplay to get through
Hmm. Hmm.
and have tons of different puzzles, tons of different things, and have something at the end of that dungeon that could really improve your, I don't want to say the ease of the final battle, but like it could.
It's
Or
like
you,
an actual tool to help you.
yes, where like you don't need them, they're optional, but this tool can help you in certain circumstances. Or, I think that
And
would be very compelling.
and to that point, they should be extremely difficult.
Yeah,
If it's going to, be something that takes a chunk out of the final boss's health bar, it should be an extremely difficult item to get, you know what I mean? Or an extremely difficult dungeon to get through.
right.
And, I sort of like the idea of you stumble into one and, it's your first time and you're like, oh, hey, cool, a dungeon. And then you get absolutely obliterated. And it's like, oh, crap. And then you try again and you still die and you still die. And then it's like, well, I gotta get to the end of this. You know what I mean? Like it just,
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I would much prefer that to the Assassin's Creed model of let's have 10 million things to do, but and maybe that's the completionist in us,
It is.
but but I much prefer more significant things to do than higher quantity. Higher
Right.
quality over higher quantity. But
Absolutely.
anyway, I think I've rambled on enough, so I'll call it quits there.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to think if I have any final plots or not plots, points. But I think I've made my point very clear too. I wish the plot had solved the problem of, hey, you're special, here you go, to, you know, you work, you make choices, you have to do things. If you've made it this far, you know exactly what I'm trying to say. But I want your opinion on it. What do you think would have made it better? Or is it perfect the way it is? Comment and let us know which one you prefer. Did we fix it? Would our game have been better or worse? Or what are your thoughts?
And what do you think about the gameplay elements? Do you think my arguments are valid? Were there things that could be improved? Or do you think it was a pretty good representation of what the wizarding world should be in a video game? Comment down below. If you want to see our last video, click up here. And if you want to check out our channel, click on the link above Trev's head.
Absolutely, right here. We will be back next week for another episode. Catch you later.